Please patronize our sponsor, who supports the Guild and our mission to educate members and non-members to enjoy and enrich their woodworking skills and experiences. You Pick Hardwood Lumber.
All right, now we can get started. Again, I'm saying this for the membership. I don't have a membership hat, but I'm putting a membership hat on. So if you haven't gone out there and updated all of your information, your profile information on the website, please do so. So I think I have everything that I know of, everything caught up, but there's a few people that don't have their phone number or an address in there, and I'm trying to do a chart that shows where everybody's located in the area. Just for that's mainly for mentorship, because we want to try on mentorships on getting people in an area to if this person's wants to be like Jay wants people in Illinois or that over there, so we want to know that information. So my wife's babysitting tonight, so she's not here to talk about mentorship. But as if everybody read my president's letter, we're looking to make a slight change to mentorship. Along with mentorship, we want to try to create my mind goes, and there's certain words that when I talk I can't pull out. So I want to create this piece where everybody has their specialty, and put your name on that list. And if a person has a question about your specialty, instead of just being a mentor, if somebody just has a question, like, hey, I'm on a scroll saw and I'm trying to do this, how do I do this? Well, all you just got to do is go into the scroll saw piece, pick that up, and go, oh, I think I'll call this person. So that's what we're trying to do. We're putting together a big spreadsheet, and we'll get, as soon as it gets done, it probably will take us a few months, but as soon as that gets done, we're going to put that up on the website. So you can just go to the website and find the person you're looking for. Some of the things we've come up with, if you have any suggestions, let me know, but we've come up with finishing. In finishing, it stains, table saw, bandsaw, scroll saw, router, and we're coming up with all of the big equipment. That's what we're trying to do, because we have a lot of our new members are coming in and they're looking for mentors, or I want some help building this piece of furniture. So that's why we're trying to do this. We're going to see if it's going to work. Coming up, classes. Corey's working on all of the classes for next year, so if he's not here tonight. We're also looking for members in here to give a presentation. We found out through, I count everybody who's at meetings throughout the year. We found out there's the 4 best attended meetings last year were ones put on by members. Then Mary May was one. We got a couple, like tonight we have Brad. I think next month we got John. John's going to do one next month on turning wood, right? This is the type of meetings that we really want to keep us in woodworking realm. So we're looking for more presentations next year for that. And Bob Kaskagard has got hats and aprons. Plus, November at the party, somebody left a hat. And we got somebody that has a lost hat. See Bob? He's got it. If not, it'll go on the free table. No, not really. And Superstar Weekend is coming up April 11th. The sign-up should be working. If I remember right, I did look on the website, and the sign-up stuff was there.
So we've got the Superstar Weekend set up. The date is, again, Saturday, April the 11th, and it's adjacent in the Gateway Room. The event is open, as Brian was just saying, for registration as of this week. The cost is $60. When you register this year, we're attaching as well your options for the lunch, which is a box lunch that comes from Valenti's. So be sure that you transfer after you register. On the same page, you transfer over to picking out your choices for your food. And so we will meet at 8:30. The event will end at 4. We'll take a break during the 3-hour morning and another one in the afternoon, and then we'll have an hour for lunch. And he starts talking at 9. If people get there at 8:30, we're going to have some light food, pastries, coffee, and some juice. So we are excited about being there, and we hope that a lot of you will be excited as well. So Jeff Miller, again, is going to be our speaker. I'm not going to go over all the information that's on our website about him. He's had a very long career. He came and spoke about 12 years ago when I set this up for a couple of years. And he's going to talk about curved parts, the uses, and how you bend, how you curve solid wood, the joinery that you would need to use, the design that it brings in, the elements of design to your project. And then the second big part is going to be hand tools. And he's going to talk about uses of different hand tools, setup, maintaining the tool, keeping a sharp edge, how to use a variety of jigs. There are some common, some that he's designed for working with hand tools and getting reliable performance. So that's it. Any questions from anybody? You sign up on the website. So when you go to the website, now there is a blue, so basically you go to our website, right on the home page. If you scroll down just a bit, you will see the Superstar Weekend. There's a blue link that'll take you right to registration, and then there's another link, I think it's blue, in registration that takes you to the food forum.
This just came in the mail, and Joe gave it to me if anybody's interested in it. It's a book of designs of intarsia for scroll sawing. I guess I'll pass this around. The lady says if we want, we can. She'll send us some more copies of this. And she said for anybody who doesn't order, there's a 20% discount on the first order. So I looked through it. There's some really, really neat patterns in here for doing intarsia. So that's kind of neat. Here, I'll set this down here and pass it around if anybody's interested in it. Okay, next up is visitors and our new members. I know we have at least one visitor tonight. And stand on up, wait for a microphone, and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. My name's John Ponzillo. I worked with this guy for a number of years, but don't hold that against me. I barely know the difference between a Phillips head and a slotted screwdriver, so that's in my favor. And the last time I used a circular saw, well, I still have 10 fingers, so it's pretty good. So I'm looking to learn whatever I can, have some fun, and meet all of you. So thank you.
All right, welcome.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Henthorn. I'm really interested in learning about cabinetry making, stuff like that.
All right.
I got little experience, so that's about it.
All right.
My name's Dave Lewis, recently retired and was always involved in construction industry, building homes and things like that, but I never did do anything with the fine woodworking and wanted to take a look at some of that, making some things. I've got 10 grandsons, so I'm trying to make some things that possibly could be, heirloom type things. So anyway.
All right.
Thanks.
Welcome.
My name is Matt. I've been woodworking for about 10 years, picked it up as a hobby when my daughter was born, and it's just something that I really, really love doing. Joinery is something that I love working on, and I've gotten into hand tools in the last year. That's been my latest obsession, but just appreciate the opportunity to be here and really look forward to spending some time meeting you guys and learning everything from you. So I appreciate it.
Well,
You're in the right place. You're in the right place.
oh, man, haven't seen you. Next up, upcoming classes. 131, the end of this month, we got Introduction to Hand Planes and Sharpening. Why do I have that in there twice? Oh, because the other one's a shorty class. The next is Lathe Tool Sharpening, which is a shorty class. That's on February 1st, 8 to 9 o'clock. The shorty classes are like the only class that you don't have to register for. All you have to do is just go ahead and show up. They're usually at 8 o'clock. All the shorty classes will start at 8 o'clock in the morning and run for 1 hour. Right, there's no cost for shorty. Usually the shorty classes we don't have registration for.
Okay.
Yeah. But that ought to be a good one, lathe sharpening, because that's something that is really needed. Then the safety class is coming up.
Brian,
again on
can I
2-5.
mention something about the lathe sharpening class? We do have a sharpening system for the lathe tools in the shop, and so this would be a good opportunity for members to learn how to utilize that appropriately.
Yes.
And efficiently. Okay?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I'll just put a plug in for that.
Yeah, that's what you're going to use, right, Brad?
Yes, I'm going to steal his mic. I just today made a great handout too, so that may be available to people who don't show, but for sure the people that do show are going to get a lot of informational content in an hour. And we're going to go through all of the main tools that you'd use doing both ingrain and bowl turning, if we can achieve that in an hour.
All right. And then the end of February, we're going to have an intro bowl turning with green wood. And it looks like that's an all-day class. So you can register for all of this stuff on the webpage. And we're going to have an open shop on Monday. I'm going to be the monitor there, so come by and keep me company. Usually I get like 1 or 2 people show up, so come on out and keep me company. And then we have another open shop day on the next month, on February 16th is going to be our next Monday open house. I don't know who is that. I thought that might have been Jay, but I don't know. I don't think so. Oh, yeah, the shop is open normal shop times, 10 to 2. Yep. All right. At the top, we had a work day scheduled for tomorrow, but we're going to cancel it due to a few things, and not enough work, probably the temperature, not enough people signed up. So we're going to wait till we get some more wood and have more for people to do. Community outreach. So far this year, we've delivered toys delivered so far, not this year, is 1,822 toys. Since conception, it's over almost 95,000. So, Bob, how many did we collect tonight?
Tonight we took in 219 toys, and we have 125 toys going out.
Oh, wow.
That's 25 to the USO and 100 to the Crisis Nursery up in Wentzville. And hopefully next month I will have some kits put together for those of you who are not currently making toys but have thought about it. The shed is getting a little light on toys, and we could certainly use more makers. So I will try to make that easy for you. We have all the parts. We have dowels, we have wheels, we have the little things that go on top. We have everything, and it's a great way to use up scrap lumber you might have lying around, softwood, pine, and the like. So hopefully we'll increase our number of makers here shortly.
Yeah, because as he says in the thing, we've only have 11 members that are actually actively making toys. Yep, and they're the ones cranking out all the toys. So, yep. So, let's see, we get some more. I know I've been lacking, but doing 2 jobs at one time, it takes a lot. Okay, community outreach for Home Sweet Home. And Tom's our chairman of this, and he does have wood tonight in the back of his truck.
I do, and I hope everybody goes home with some. It's oak from Fooder Crafters, and some, it's all oak, and some oak from Vic Barr's estate.
Oh,
so
all right.
It's all pretty good looking stuff. The table program's going well. We will have a reschedule mid-February, 3rd week of February, something like that. When we hopefully go by Jay's and pick up the oak out of his attic. So that will be a typical work day as we've done before, where we process it from the rough sawing all the way to the table kits. Let's see, other than that, we have several new people building tables, which is great. The dinette table program's going very well. I'll pick up enough wood for 3 more tables next week. Our count, and I think we're up to about 350 tables. We had 132 at the end of December, and great turnout tonight. I think I've got 3 tables at home, and we've got 6 tables outside.
Ooh,
so,
all right.
at any rate, thanks to everybody that contributes. It's very important, and the people really appreciate it. And about 12% of the folks that they serve, Home Sweet Home serves, are veterans. So, we're touching pretty much everybody, in the area and contributing to, all the different categories. So it's a good thing, and look forward to, keeping it going.
Keeping it going. Tom said, you said at a board meeting the last time you guys donated, as soon as our tables got put on the dock, they were tagged by families as wanting them.
That was Doug Larico, his table. Honest to goodness, I think I set it down, and a woman and the person, the helper, came over and tagged that table right away. So, I mean, they're going and I take an inventory, once a month, or we didn't have any dinette tables down there, and we've delivered, I think, somewhere 16 or 17 dinettes. We only had 3 of the little tables in stock.
Wow.
And like I said, we've delivered since April 132 tables. So they're one of the first things to go because they're portable, they're small, and they're very functional for the folks. So keep it up.
All right. Thank you.
I did pick up a sofa server table from the shed. Beautiful job on it. There was no name, and if somebody told me they did it or dropped it off, I forgot. So if you dropped it at the shed, please let me know so I can give you credit for it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, Christmas toy program. It's going to start up again next month. Wayne, first and third Fridays, right?
Yep, first and third Fridays.
First and third Fridays.
Starting next month. We've set a goal of 1,800 toys again for this next year, and we got 100 in inventory so far. And just wanted to point out that since the conception of this program, we've had somewhere in the vicinity of 7,000 toys that we've donated at Christmas time. I don't remember the exact totals, but you put those toys together with the monthly toy program, and we're over 100,000 toys that have been donated.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Okay, next up, Q&A. Questions and answers. Anybody got anything that they want to bring up, they're working on, they got a question about? There we go. Jerry.
I got a secondhand planer. It's been working fine. I've been doing a lot of oak and walnut. And now that it's not feeding, so what should the steps I do to do the rollers and take it,
What kind is it?
I believe it's a Delta.
Delta. My Delta, when it stops feeding like that, I clean the in-feed roller with naphtha.
I got some after you mentioned that last.
Yeah, and that's what I do. I do that about every 6 months, is just clean that in-feed roller, and it takes care of it.
Okay, I'm just kind of literally putting my fingers up and around the knives, so I thought I'd ask first.
Make sure it's unplugged and turned off.
Now, Jerry, for my planer, I do the same thing. I clean those rollers, but I use rubbing alcohol, and it takes it off. And I'm always afraid I don't want to soften that roller too much.
Wax the table also. Get that or some slip coat or something to make it slick. That also helps.
Last time I was here, I asked something about loosening old glue, trying to rework or put back together an old rocking chair, and somebody suggested acetone, which I wanted to just say thank you. Worked great.
All right.
A question about the intro to the bowl turning class in end of February.
Yep.
Is that it said 8 to 4. Does that mean you need to plan for 8 hours, or?
We're only going to have 4 students do it. We start with a green log and chainsaw it into a blank, and it will be somewhat wet wood, and we'll bring it in and do a green turning, and there'll be probably an hour, maybe even plus, of seeing a bunch of tools that you use and discussion of how you hold wood to a lathe, yada yada. And then you guys will get there'll be 2 participants to each of our 2 lathes. And so it's going to be more learning how that process is done. You may leave with a sealed green bowl to dry. I've taught this class a few different times, and there's a lot to do. And some people have come to my shop after it's dried over 3 to 6 months and done their dry turning, which is the finish turning. So all of that will make sense if you decide you want to come to the class. It starts at 8 and it ends at 4, and we would take a short lunch break. And
when the registration's open, because the website now says bookings closed.
it should now say, I went over that with Todd, our IT person, today, because I looked and both of those for me showed closed, both the lathe tool shorty, which you don't have to register for apparently, but the way it was set up, it is to register. But for sure for this one, because if there's enough interest, that in the past has sometimes filled up very quickly.
Yeah, the answer to that question, if it's closed, make sure you're logged in.
Right.
As a member. If you're not logged in as a member, you can't take classes if you're not a member. So log in, and then you'll get your booking that way. So just be mindful of that when you're registering for classes.
But yeah, that's the biggest thing that I've come across on people that have said, well, it's closed. And I went, are you logged in? Yeah.
I'm going to be real brief. Dave and I had gotten this lathe that we brought out to the shop that is our new lathe and works quite well. And the people to thank are Dan Coleman, who's not here tonight, who did a little bit of machining on the new electrical part. Myself was quite involved in that. Dave and I, on a rainy day, took a chance and brought this broken lathe out that is actually a fantastic lathe. So my show and tell tonight are the first 2 bowls that were turned on it. I needed to turn a bowl from a sizable blank to make sure all the electronics work, because we had to put a new piece of electronics on it that really is a master controller. And I own 2 lathes myself. It really does a nice job. So cherry bowl and apple bowl, and they're signed as the first bowls. And anyhow.
All right.
I'm John Markeel, and back in my younger days, I was an avid kayaker, and I built my own cedar strip tandem. It's about 23 feet long, 75 pounds, a little hard to bring it in here under my arm. But I also built the Inuit Greenland-style paddles, which is deceptively simple. The Inuits just took a piece of driftwood and carved it out. This is a high-tech composite. It's a little walnut on the side, fiber foam core. It's fiberglass underneath the walnut with carbon fiber on the ends. And then this is Western red cedar, which holds up, and when it gets wet, it doesn't rot out on you. This one I put my initials in because it's my display piece. And I also brought in the jig that I use because you have to hold this perfectly when you're trying to bevel that from 1/2 inch in the middle down to about 1/8 of an inch on the edge. And this allows you can clamp it, adjust the angle precisely, and then I use a sanding disc on the drill press and just slide it right through, and it just sands it beautifully.
This was a piece of English walnut that I turned with a little epoxy to fill in some defects in it. But that was the English walnut. And this one was a piece of camphor that I brought back from Florida. You can still smell the camphor in the middle of it.
Right. All right, now working with small parts, it's Brad up again.
When I was standing over there a couple of minutes ago talking about who was involved in this new lathe, my mind said Ron Romiti, but my mouth did not. And anyhow, thank you. So our topic tonight is woodworking with small parts. The gentleman that's interested in cabinetry, there will be machines that you'll use in cabinetry that we're talking about, even though we're going to be limited to trying to think a little bit small-ish with some of the setup and safety issues. So the overview of what we're going to talk about, we're going to focus mainly on 5 stationary machines. I'm going to talk a little bit about the table saw, the band saw, the router table, and the lathe, and then the planer joiner. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about what we need to be thinking through when we're working relatively small. What some of the jigs that we need to use, the safety devices, where we need to set the blade, what can happen potentially if things don't go well. I'm going to talk about alignment issues with how to put pieces together and get them to stay where you want them to stay. I'm going to very briefly bring adhesive options into this, and then I'm going to also touch just a bit on finishing. This actually, let's see here. I think I skipped over that slide. So this is what I'm talking about with small parts. And these are some of the concepts also that we're going to be talking about. This is a picture, and I started doing veneering work. That picture has a beveled plywood frame, and then it's got an outer hardwood maple strip and another strip on the inside, and then that's rabbeted for the picture to fit in. So I'm going to talk about how you cut miters in small parts like this, how you use splines to register pieces. I'm going to introduce some of those power tools in some of the things that I've built to get a better result with some of these techniques. I'm going to talk about at the router table how to make a lift like you see on the front that lifts the top of that lid. That is an African blackwood lift. There are also, which you can't see well, are little lathe turn feet on the bottom. I'm going to talk about producing those. And similarly, those top finial type pieces on the boxes, the turn boxes at the right hand, were also something that some of what I'm going to discuss would apply to. So some of these parts that are in these 3 pictures you're going to see again in what we're going to talk about. So the first power tool, the table saw, I'm going to introduce a couple of sleds for doing miters, and you're going to get a lot better results by using sleds at your table saw that are properly made than what you're going to get off of a miter chop saw, unless maybe you have a very expensive Capex Festool that is really set up to perform. This book, we had Doug Stowe come. He was our superstar in 2019. I don't have any rock star or athletic signatures, but I did get Doug to sign the inside of my book. So I don't want that book sets up here tonight. And so Doug gave a great talk, gave us a lot to think about. I would suggest buying that book if you're interested in building some of these jigs and making jewelry box style woodworking. There's a lot of good content in there, and basically every jig that I'm going to talk about tonight is actually in that book. We're going to talk about feather boards and what those do to support our work and keep our hands away from cutting surfaces, push sticks. I'm going to talk just a brief bit about a riving knife or splitter to keep the kerf that you make when you push through a table saw open so it doesn't collapse and catch the blade and cause a potentially serious kickback. And then we're going to talk about a proper fitting throat plate and some of the adjustments that you may or may not know about, but are important when you're doing small part work, because you're running your part across the fence, and the insert is basically what is supporting the bottom of your work when you're near your blade. So that really needs to be adjusted well. This is a miter sled for a little bit wider parts. The distance between my fence, which is near to you, and the blocks that are holding those toggles up, is a little over 3 inches. I think it was about a 3 1/4 distance. For jewelry boxes, for the walls that go around a jewelry box, that size is perfect. I have another sled, and that also is in Doug's book. This sled is for even smaller parts. I end up using this for the frames like I showed, or the capping that goes around jewelry boxes like that small box in the right lower corner. I had to double stick tape some additional wood over that because I own a saw stop and I taught a jewelry box class out at our wood shop, and I had mentioned this before, and the runners were set up for the distance to the blade on my saw stop, which actually was close to bought by when I sat on the board and was twisting to get us to buy a saw stop. And I took it out there and pushed it through, and it was off probably at least a 64th. So my zero clearance, where I can line up boards and know that's exactly where I'm cutting, because the blade I use with that, I have about 5 blades that I use at my table saw, but I write on these jigs what blade I'm using if I want to keep it zero clearance, so that I use that same blade. So basically I could not use that anymore for alignment, and that really aggravated me, so I double stuck and reran the blade across it to specifically get that back. And I was surprised, but everybody should know that when you use the exact same saw that you own, you may end up with a potential difference in some of the machining. So looking at the saw, these are some of the things that you're gonna need. That feather board is reversible at the table saw, and at the router table, you're pushing from right to left. At the band saw, you're pushing from left to right across the fence. So those magnetic ones are reversible. I use that a lot, but at your router table, if you're over the aluminum plate that covers the throat, or you're over that plastic type plate or too close to it with the front magnetic, it will not stick. So I also have, and I'm going to show that with how I make veneer, a double stacked feather board that gets me 3 inches up, and it's got a miter track that runs that's metal. And so that's what I use. When that becomes a problem with a small part, I will put that in and use it as a feather board. So your goal with these small parts is you're wanting to keep them, and really any size of lumber, the push needs to be slightly angled towards the fence, and you need to hold the part down. And these little parts have a tendency to rise up with that blade turning. So I made these push paddles, and these work quite well. I have 3 out there. I start with a 1/4, and then the next one is 3/8, and the biggest one in the MDF at the back there is 1/2 inch. And I actually brought some paper and a pencil, and I have those 3. There's nothing rocket science about the design of those, but if anybody wants to draw them and says, you know what, I would like those in my shop, you can come up and trace one of these, easily make your own. So what I do, depending on the distance between the blade and the fence, is I will use that paddle, and I'm following Mark Adams' safety recommendation and what we teach during the safety class, which is to use special consideration with any board less than 12 inches long and narrower or as narrow as 3 inches. So a lot of these pieces, when I veneer them and I go to trim each side to make them exactly what I want, I'm dealing with a board that maybe is 1 inch, or it may be 3/4 of an inch that I'm making frames or parts that go in jewelry boxes. So as far as the blade goes, I usually take that blade up only the distance from the bottom of the gullet of the blade to the top of the tooth is usually about 3/8 of an inch. I may only have that blade about 1/8 of an inch, the top of those bits above my workpiece. So if you ended up having a problem, that is greatly going to reduce your chance for an injury. The safety saw, you also obviously have the breaking capacity, but in Mark Adams' safety video that we teach, he talks about having a laceration versus an amputation. Table saw is a big place where those kind of injuries occur, and if you keep that blade height just barely above the wood, you do have a higher chance of a kickback because more teeth are in contact with the wood. But these types of paddles will help you keep pressure and keep that small part down against the table. You can angle and have a little bit of push force towards the blade. Your riving knife will help keep the kerf open behind, and you should get a good consistent cut if you do that. The feather board helps keep it coming in tight, and these push paddles, and also you can adjust those grippers, and I'm going to show that gripper at the top right with the platform on it. I use that at the table saw occasionally. It has a hook that you can use on the back that also helps push, but I greatly like these push paddles. So that is a typical setup. It's hard to see the Allen keys down in the bottom right next to the fence, but getting back to the throat plate, the throat plate has 4 little Allens on it in the corners. And if you do not have that throat plate up level with the table, the cast iron table, and you're pushing a small piece across, and as I said, your push is going right across that throat plate, when you get to the back side, you're gonna, if it's too low, you're gonna hit that cast iron table, and you're either gonna have to know to immediately stop your cut, and you can take your knee and pop that paddle off and then adjust, or you can push stuff through before you ever begin those cuts. And so I taught a safety class a couple of months ago, and Dave taught me how to do the safety class with him. And so we push a wide piece through where you can do it by hand. I often still use a feather board with that. And then we push a narrow piece. And so I was pushing a narrow piece through. I had the blade down. I talked about some of this. I did not check the throat plate. And not only was the throat plate weakened because somehow it had broken in the back, so it wasn't clipped down firmly, but it also was setting too low, and my piece hit that I was pushing through teaching safety class. So I kicked the thing off. But so those are the kind of things that I want you to take away from the talk tonight. to try to think through, and that's what I'm going to try to go over with several of these machines. So basically, the other thing I did is I added some sticky tape hooks, and at the bottom of my saw, I keep those, and I keep a push stick. And I'm going to say in a minute that at one point I only had one of those small push sticks made. And I have a slide that'll remind us how much time we spend looking for things if we don't have them in the right places. So this is me pushing. What I've done here is I've tapered a piece of high-grade plywood to make a decorative tapered frame, which I think looks better than a level frame. And I do framing with a lot of my marquetry pieces, and I will mention one over here that I brought tonight. I brought some in before. But what I'm doing is the frame has been veneered on the back and on the top. The top is the yellow below the push pad, and it's beveled. And I leave them slightly oversized, and then I want to clean all of them up because usually I have 4 of them to make a full frame, and I want them all to be the same thickness. So I end up pushing them through in that tight area, and that is probably the 3/8 push pad that I made. And again, I'm able to keep that down and up against the fence for the reasons that I've already mentioned. This one is me actually doing a buried cut. It's hard to see down in the bottom, and I have some of these pieces up here. I could pass around while I'm talking, but you can see on the yellow beveled piece where the spline sticks off down here at the bottom. And so that is holding the outside hardboard cap against plywood and then a 1/16 inch solid veneer on the top and on the bottom, and then I've got another piece of mahogany that's rabbited in this application. So what I'm showing is I'm cutting a blind, I'm cutting a groove for my spline to fit in, and I cut that same groove at the same time with the same distance set up, and I always reference off the back. And I am cutting that, and this is a setup block I made, and these splines that I put in are typically, or always, 3/16 of an inch, and they need to be 1/8 of an inch thick. And so I'm setting this up because one goes in the top piece and one goes in my plywood piece. I'm setting it up at 3/32, and I make my splines slightly under 3/16 so they fit. And that really helps with alignment, glue up, making it really simple to get a good fit with this stuff. And that's after I've prepared all of these beveled pieces that are becoming my frame at the same time to the same thickness at the table saw. And I am embarrassed to say that when I taught a jewelry class, I actually, because I was using rock maple that was out of a 100-year-old piano that had been given to me, and it was super solid wood, I was pushing that through way closer than 3 inches from the blade. It was a buried cut, and I was using it at my saw stop that would break. But that's not a good safety practice to get in. And that's part of what forced me to come back and make these push sticks and rethink this. So I think all of us, when we're doing things in our shop, and a lot of us probably don't have a saw stop, need to be mindful of what are the risks that I'm entertaining when I'm doing this, and how can I mitigate those. And so again, back to that 12-inch, 3-inch rule, trying to keep your hands away from turning blades, whether they're router bits, table saws, band saw blades. This is my comment about push sticks. So I made about 6 or 8 of them, and now I have them hanging from all of my tools. So going over to the bandsaw, that's not a very pretty slide, and I hadn't looked at these for about a month, and when I looked at them today, I thought, why did I pick that slide? But I did because I put a piece of plywood on all of my cast iron tops, and that is a piece of leftover paneling, and so that the bottom side that's down is finished and doesn't let moisture transmit through it. So cast iron tops, when dust sits on them, tend to increase the chance of rusting. If you like to use them for storage, and I like to set pieces of wood that I'm going to cut or I finish on top of my table saw plywood piece, I leave all kinds of stored stuff on my router table. So I put these down on everything, but most of these also have a second use. So this becomes my zero clearance tabletop to keep small parts from fitting in. And my throat plate on that, as you can see, is pretty decently sized, but still some of these little bitty pieces tend to fall in there and bind. You're not going to get a kickback because the blade's just going up and down, but you want to keep your finger away from it, away from the blade, at least 3 inches. Often you reach around and pull stuff through. Once you're behind the blade, it becomes safe, but there are applications where a zero clearance is very helpful. I made my own shop saw and resaw fence, and I'll go over that a bit. That's what I use to make veneer, but you can do many other things with it. I'm going to talk about the double stack feather board I already mentioned, and then push sticks and pads. So this is my clamping on my bandsaw, my 14-inch bandsaw, and I have used that a number of times, and that's a nice flat piece of plywood. And so often I'll have all kinds of stuff, as I said, stacked up on top of that. This is a resaw fence. The rail on the back, you need to use high quality wood, and by that I mean wood that's not going to potentially move as much. That's got quarter sawn grain and a little bit of rift down at the bottom. It's a hard piece of hard maple, 3/4 inch. So that's 4 inches. I've got an 8-inch tall fence that's from high grade plywood. I attach that through T-bolt, and you can buy a T-bolt cutting bit for your router table. To make that, you machine the first part of that on a table saw, and then you spread out for the top of the T with that bit at your router table. But the way that attaches to my cleat, you can see some tape hanging down at the bottom, and I use tape as a shim. And so if my tabletop sits at 90 degrees perfect to my blade, I want that fence to be as close to 90 degrees as well. And so I put a square on these things, and I sometimes have to shim to cant that over a bit. And that's what I'm doing there, is running tape all across the bottom to give just a slight shim. So this is a setup. It's notched in the back because actually if you don't have your fence go beyond a 1/2 inch or maybe an inch past the blade, which is here, what it does is, as you open that wood and you've got forces in there that are opening up, it allows that room to escape the cut, and you can still easier keep the force against the fence. So my goal when I prep this wood is to have for cutting veneer 2 parallel sides and a flat bottom that's 90 degrees. Sometimes I'll make the top flat so both edges are square in case I flip the board over as I'm doing it. But I really want to get as close to a perfect cut. The cut I use for my veneers is a heavy 3/32, and I want to get as much of my material able to use. Sometimes I'm using just little blocks of exotic wood. The bottom of that fence, which is only about 4 inches, that's the plywood part, well, it's notched. I will leave that exposed just about a 1/2 inch if I'm cutting smaller pieces, although really the expansion of the wood as it comes out is most important with the big pieces. That double stacked feather board, I had to flip it because in I'm pushing left to right instead of the usual right to left at your router and table saw. Those are available at Rocker. At Rockler, they have a directional arrow. There is none on the side I flipped it to, but it seems to work perfectly fine. Flipped over, I can convert it to a single. So if I've got to push something up against and I can't use the magnet on my quick magnet, I'll end up using this as either a single feather board or, in this application, a double. I built a brace because when I'm pushing against that fence, the blade end of the fence, if I'm using much force, and I mean you're not you're not putting all of your weight into it, but you definitely want to keep pressure. Tends to deflect, and when you're working with tight tolerances like I am trying to do, then that brace makes a huge difference. I tend to put 3 pieces of tape on the end of the brace here to keep it at 330 seconds, and then if I'm using wood that I can't get as good of a cut on and I need a little bit wider material to end up with the veneer size that I want to use, then I will take a couple pieces of that tape off. That becomes my registration point. My splines are also 330 second, so I push those through there too when I make them. So I probably have cut at least a couple hundred veneers since I started doing handsaw marquetry 2 years ago, and it's only been in the last 6 months that I started using that brace. So a lot of this stuff kind of evolves as you continue to do stuff and you think about, what can I do to get to be more efficient if you're working with tolerances that you want to be fairly exact with. So any questions about that setup in particular? I have a video that's about a minute. So my wife was my producer, director, cinematographer, and you will see my tiny hand and smallish wrist in this video, and I will show you exactly how I push a piece of wood across to try to get a good, clean veneer. And I will tell you, a continuous speed, and you can hear it in the blade, is something that you can pay attention to, but if you keep a slow, continuous feed going across, you're going to get a lot cleaner piece come off of the saw. The other thing, and I won't go into great detail, but the saw needs to be set up correctly. The upper and lower guide blocks need to be slightly touching the blade. You don't want them heavily sparking when the blade's running without any pressure on it, because the blade will overheat and probably lose some of its temper. I started using a carbide blade after going through a couple Highlander resaw blades, which are very good, but I have had those carbide blades last for a year and a half before I needed to replace them. And those are a couple of the big things, and then the tensioning on the blade is something that I won't go into, but all those parameters need to be in place before these things that I'm talking about will give you clean veneers. I cleaned that area for the video because I wanted my wife to see it when it was very good. No, I don't know. I do have a dust collection system. It's not gated. And that was a piece of poplar, and I'm using that for green leaves and marquetry, but the goal is for me to get something off that I can put 2 passes on each side through my drum sander and have it exactly what I want. And the other goal is I don't want to go back to my joiner and planer and have to run that wood through for the next cut every time. And that's what I was doing in the beginning. So I'm showing you this in case, and I know this isn't going to appeal to everybody, but if you do enough of these things, anything you do, you can have that process evolve and change and get better performance. So we're moving to the router table. Again, my plywood storage covering there. So we're going to talk about, again, some of the same concepts: throat plate size, feather boards, push sticks, I'm going to introduce hidden spline jig in Doug Stowe's book. That's the only jig I brought in person over here. And the box lifts, that's what raises the lid that I'd showed you. I do make most of those on the router table. So this is in your fence. I've got a feather board and it's angled for the right direction, a right to left feed. I've got my magnetic feather board. If it was any closer, I would have to go get those miter slot rails, the black ones I showed you before. We've got a lift out of the shop. We've got a number of these inserts. They should be sized, and you should bring your fence in close to the blade, but not where the blade cuts into it. That one's got a pilot bearing, and that's lined up with the front of the fence. I've got a push stick, and I'm pushing a small part through there. It's not a piece of veneer because I don't cut those at the table, but it was a small part. There again, hanging push sticks. So this is, and in this box I brought over here, I'm going to show a few parts, and I apologize. Some of this stuff I've briefly talked about before, brought some of these in, but this is the tray insert that goes in the box. This is for the floor. This was cut on a table saw. This groove is for an 1/8 inch piece of plywood that goes in for the floor. I pre-seal those or finish them with shellac before they ever go in. I do the same to this. This was slotted for a divider. And what I'm going to show you is how to use this hidden spline jig to make easy wrapping the sides of this box so these miters stay together. So basically, this jig right here is this, and very simple. And this back edge is riding against my fence. And I have set the distance up for where this straight cut, that's an 1/8 inch straight cut router bit. Those are white side bits that I greatly like. This is my gauge for what type of table saw or bit that I'm getting these splines to fit in. So this spline is fit for my white side bit, and I'm going to be having it travel and not come out either of these sides across this miter. And then I will use CA glue and hold it in on one side, so when I wrap this thing together and glue it, I can just tape these edges, lightly clamp them, and be done. So that's basically what I'm showing there, and then I will show in the next slide how it looks with these miters put in. So in order to place them at the right place, I will draw a mark on here where I want my bit to start and stop. I will lay this down on the bit. It's only got to come up 3/32 of an inch, and I will push it across. And I will measure out on my plate here exactly where both sides of that bit are with lines, and so then I know where I'm starting and stopping. And so this is the end result. These were pre-finished with shellac. I'll talk briefly about that. And then I used tape to hold them together. This box lifts, I usually batch make those. That's a piece of African blackwood. You can buy little pieces of it cheaply in these off-cut bins, like up at Woodcraft is mostly where I've bought this. I will machine it down to the maximal thickness I need. This doesn't show very well, but I will use a straight cut bit and cut out where this tenon part is going to be. This is 2 lifts, 2 sides, and I will rip this once I'm done, and my tenons will be here, and this will be the machine part, and then I will cut them off to make whatever width I want. So out of a piece like that, that's probably 4 inches, which is a safer size to work with, I'll probably make 8 of those lifts. And so there's a number of steps. I end up on the machining part rounding over, so I use a round over bit here, and then where this is concave, I have 2 core box bits, and I will run this over those bits. If I was trying to do just one piece, it wouldn't be as safe. If I was meaning 1/2 of this, or if I was trying to do just one of those. So it really works with a lot of these small parts to batch cut them, if that makes sense. Any questions on that part? I am going to move to the lathe next. That is a cake stand my sisters and niece had been after me to make for a couple of years, so that is out of mahogany. That was turned on a lathe, both the platter part to fit the bell and the upright part. So I'm going to talk a little bit, even if you haven't done lathe work, I'm going to throw in some terms. You know, maybe for some of you this will be appealing and make you interested in learning. I'm going to talk a bit about the jaws that hold, spigot jaws. I'm going to talk a little bit about crown center, the tailstock part, and then I use the lathe to make those little feet I showed you on the first box, and I usually make a bunch of them. So I have 2 bags over here of 2 sizes, and there's about 20 in each of the bags, and it's much easier to make them that way. So you have a headstock on a lathe where the motor turns a spindle, and that spindle you work with either from the outside where it is threaded at a certain number of teeth per inch. You screw a holding system on like this 4-jaw chuck, or the inside of that spindle is hollow and it's tapered, and that tapering is called a Morse taper, and that allows you to push a piece in that's tapered and it friction fits. So I'm going to show you a couple applications that I use in a lathe in small parts. As far as these spigot jaws go, you can swap those bigger, which holds a tenon for a bowl usually, and that also is tapered in so that you have to cut that tenon a certain way. These spigot jaws down below are straight up and down, they're taller, and they come in much tighter. So I will machine a square block of wood or a rectangle block of wood into a cylinder with a tool called a roughing gouge, and I brought one of those over. You could do it with a skew if you were good with a skew, and then I will make a little shoulder on it, and that shoulder will fit up against this with this cylinder part inside it, and that provides one option for a good holding force when you're doing parts. The other way you can use a 4-jaw chuck is you can put one of these crown drives. This is called a crown drive. I have a 1-inch one and a 5/8 one, and it's got a little reference pin that pushes in, and these tiny little teeth barely mark up the end of the wood. As long as you don't get catches or really forceful catches, those tend to hold very well, and you can just compress them together in the lathe, and I'll show you the workpiece as it's being machined. This is where the Morse taper exists, and I'm going to show you how I put it in as a Morse taper application in one of these other pictures. So you got the headstock that's driving the wood, you've got a tailstock that's passively following. In a bowl, you don't want the bowl blank to fly off, so you have usually the tailstock up against it until you reach a point where you have to hollow out the inside of the bowl. In this application where you're doing end-grain turning, the tail inside needs to always be supported. So these pieces of wood are always between the motor end, which is the headstock with a spindle, and the tailstock that I've pulled up for support. This is called a live center on the tailstock, and that turns. So this is what I was talking about doing batch production of these feet that I have in a bag. I have that 5/8 inch. That's called a crown drive center. And you can somewhat see the taper on that. So this is how it goes when it's in the lathe. I've had a rectangular block. I've taken my roughing gouge and turned it down to a cylinder. That cylinder is bigger than the maximal diameter of my feet, and I'm using these little teeth in that crown that barely go in, and this is Morse tapered into the inside of my spindle, and that's what's turning this, the friction between the Morse taper and my headstock drive center. My tail end is passively following, and I'm taking tools different than you use in a bowl turning application to make these fine cuts. And I'm making them with, I'm marking out where they go, so all these feet are the same, and I'm using a little bit of distance between them so I can cut them. And then I'm using a skew and a round over, what's called a spindle gouge, to make these curves. And that takes a little while to learn to do, but we've done a couple classes on that over the past years. So anyhow, that's what I'm doing with these little blocks that you pay, you know, maybe $6, $8 for. This is an exotic wood that's quite expensive, not quite as much as ebony, but it makes a beautiful polished kind of standout contrast in your smaller boxes. Any questions about that? So this is it off the lathe. I've done light sanding, and I'm just, well, I'll take a little no-set flex saw that I bought at Lowe's that I've had for 15 years, cut those things apart. This will be the very bottom, and this will be the top. And then I'll make a little attachment dowel that holds that to the bottom of my box, and that's what I'm doing there. I just lined that up. I would have been drilling the hole and then putting the actual little dowel that gets cut off. That's what holds it to the bottom of the box. These are the tools that I was mentioning, left to right. That's a roughing gouge where you turn from square to a cylinder. That's a parting tool that makes those gaps between the pieces. Those are two sizes of spindle gouges. In that shorty class, we're going to go over how to grind those. That grind is more extended than a bowl gouge so that you can get down in those tight corners. That is a skew chisel. You can really get down deeply with that. There's a lot of things you can do with a skew chisel in the way of doing end grain work, but those take a huge amount of skill to do all of the finest things that you can do with a skew chisel. And those are very time consuming to sharpen because you cannot sharpen those on the grinder system. They have to be sharpened with typical sharpening blocks like you would like you would sharpen your plane blades. So we're over to the planer joiner now. So basically, again, you need to really be thinking about your 12-inch. What do I do with things that are smaller than that? You've got some thickness sizes that you want to be careful running them through your planer and over your joiner, and I've got those specified. And then I'm going to talk a bit about how I push that veneered, tapered sled through. Actually, it's a plywood taper that I'm making, and then I veneer the top of the taper, and I'll show that. I like to use these big push sticks, and I built one of those and took it out to the shop. But what those do when you're pushing across your joiner to do the first face of your wood is they hook the back side, but you're quite a ways away from the back and able to put downward pressure, and that hook helps keep that board moving. I know a lot of us use the push paddles for that, and I find those slipping around on me. Sometimes I put sandpaper on the bottom of them, but I personally greatly like that. That's a magnetic to check for metal. I sometimes do that depending on where I've gotten the wood before I put it through. I have a carbide head joiner planer combo machine that the head itself is spiral and carbide, like the two that we have, the joiner and the planer, that are separate out at the shop. And I've got my plywood. So this is my smaller part for thinner stuff, less than 3/8 of an inch. That's about a couple feet long. The one we have at the shop has a hook, and on the infeed side of the table, it hooks and it extends all the way through. Mine is flat on the bottom, and I'm actually pushing that through. So the board that I put it on, I have a slight lip at the bottom that sticks up about 1/16. That's a hardboard lip on this particle board. It doesn't show up well. That's proud to the face of my particle board by about a 1/16 of an inch or a little more. What that does is for those splines, if I'm making a wider, really thin piece, is I butt it up against that stop at the back, and then I run a piece of double stick tape just down the front, and that will stay stuck and hold that as I'm pushing this through the planer trying to get down to 1/8 of an inch. Now granted, this will be slightly thinner because it's up on double stick tape, and this little bit of wood, I just cut it off, and then I have a nice piece. And I find that for me as a sled for thin parts has tended to work the best. And I think all of us, you develop your, if you're doing a lot of woodworking, if you're, you know, and I, since I retired, have done a lot more, and I've really been passionate about this for probably 20 years now, trying to build different things. This is the taper jig I made, and so what I will do is I will cut those plywood strips to 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch. They're parallel on their faces, and then what I'll do is I line it up with this bottom mark, and that bottom edge gets held with double stick tape, and then I will slightly bump it up where this other line is on this raised piece of board that is only about a 1/16 of an inch, and that gives me the bevel I'm going for. And most of these, when I'm running several pieces through, usually this is 2 sides of a frame. This is about a little less than 2 feet long between this stop and that stop. So I sandwich it between stops, I tilt the edge up, and then I run this whole thing through my planer. And I've done several dozen frames that way, and that seems to work. And that's just something I kind of made up. I think double stick tape is definitely something worth keeping in your shop. So this is what I end up having made. This is the picture on the far right that I showed you with the rabbit, the mahogany hardboard on the inside, and on the outside that's yellow wood. This is a frame that was beveled to go around this marquetry picture I have of my son and daughter-in-law's dog, a photograph I took that I did a marquetry piece on. That is an exotic wood called Peroba rosa. This is white limba, and that I think is ebony. So that's the other cool thing about doing small pieces, is you can use expensive wood, but you're using small amounts of it. And if you make your own veneer, even though plywood has gotten stupid expensive, Baltic birch, I don't even know if you can still find much of that. It's quite pricey. I think it used to be quite cheap, but you can make a ton of veneer, have a small bag, or use cawls and clamps, and really make some cool looking stuff that's hard to come up with solid wood. And then you can put hardboard on the exposed plywood edges. And again, you're using small pieces. You can capture more beautiful pieces of the hardwood like bird's eye or curl or something that you're trying to really up the artistry. So in order to put those, the alignment part, in order to put this all together, I end up using a variety of things to keep these small pieces together. I had mentioned before in a talk about nail points. I'm going to talk for a second about epoxy. We've been talking repeatedly about splines. These are these tiny little quick clamps. I think those are about $3 a piece, and I own about a dozen of them. And what I do is I will put those caps on. I pre-finish those pieces of veneer, and then I typically use a hide glue that's pre-made, and I'm going to show that in a minute. And I clamp those up for a couple hours, if that, and then I take them off and do the next piece. So it's a pretty quick process. This is the bottom. These are OG feet that are on the bottom of that box over there. And I had talked about these when I did a jewelry box talk, I believe. But I decided, how do I register these things and make them look good? And so I ended up having some aluminum brads that I drove in, one on each side, and I cut them and I just took a file and filed them to a point. And then I mark where they go, and I typically put that type of stuff where there is a small gluing surface or there may be a little bit of space. I use epoxy because it gap fills really well. And this 5-minute stuff, if your alignment is good, it gets really tacky and dries quickly. Acetone, somebody mentioned that earlier for their wheels or something, but acetone is an okay solvent for epoxy. Mineral spirits, VMA, alcohol, denatured alcohol. I use shellac all the time, and that wasn't coming to my head. So I put that there for that reason. As long as it's not rock hard, it will help dissolve. So I've got 5-minute epoxy there. I've got registration marks. This is the bottom of a jewelry box. I've got it already placed where it's going to go. I've got this pre-finished with shellac, and the area where I'm going to glue, which really, using epoxy, it wouldn't have mattered if I had finished this off with shellac. The epoxy would stick nicely. I have it numbered so I don't lose where the 4 legs go, because those brads are in different places. Clamp it, and this is back to the splines. I typically use blue painter's tape. Once you get these splines set and you get your finish, your in my case shellac, and same thing on the 1/8 of an inch plywood base, I will lay this out, push it against my table saw fence, and I will tape those tightly together. I'll put the floor in, I'll do a quick practice fold, and those splines make all the difference in the world in how that stays together. And so I will tape all those together, and I will clamp them, but very light pressure. If you use anything more than light pressure, sometimes you'll get stuff to shift. And since they're pre-finished, any glue that leaks out is easy to remove. Hide glue comes off with warm water quite easily. So I will use some warm water and a couple little poker sticks in the inside corners, and it really makes a considerable improvement in how easy that goes together. And so that one in particular is the tray that's inside a box like that. I do the same thing with the wider walls that are a little under 3 inches in those boxes. And I hardboard.
Brad,
yeah.
ask you a quick question?
Sure.
And I know you're getting way beyond me.
I'm sorry?
When you're doing, where's my okay. When you're taking in, gluing up these side pieces, I notice you're using plywood. Is that for stability purposes?
When I'm sorry, my hearing.
When you take and you're gluing up these sides, I see you're using plywood. Is that for stability?
Are you calling this blind plywood?
Well, you glued some veneers to that plywood when you showed that cross section.
Yeah. So the substrate is plywood,
yeah, and
I glue veneer to it.
Is that for so that it doesn't? Is that for? So it doesn't expand and contract so much?
You're talking about the plywood
use?
Yes. Well, you need a substrate if you're not using hard wood, a solid board. So you could use MDF. I find plywood to perform better, but you have to have some kind of substrate. It will, if you've got wood that moves, like if you have burl wood and exotic type wood, to take that solid wood down to a veneer, it's going to expand and contract very little when you glue it to a piece of plywood, which is stable, typically layered, glued together wood. MDF, same way. I just haven't used MDF as much. But does that?
Well, yes, that does explain it. The other question I had when you were talking about the indexing pins for the feet, is that
talking about which?
The indexing
the
pins
index pin
for the feet. Is that also to keep it from sliding around while you're gluing it?
Yeah, so I will pick where I need those feet to go, and I'll drill a 1/4 inch hole in the bottom, just like you saw me push those pins for the OG feet. I'll drill that in the corner, down as deep, and the part of that dowel that protrudes above that black wood foot, is what will get glued in there. And I use just a bit of epoxy. And the other thing about these exotic woods, you have to finish those because they have oils in them. And that oil, if I shellac it, if I waited till the end to finish this, that stuff runs everywhere. Okay. Ebony, African blackwood, a lot of the exotic woods. So this is just the frame around that piece that I mentioned. I've got it taped on. I will lightly use clamps. The miters are off of that jig that I replaced when I lost my zero tolerance. And I have not used a shooting board with this to try to clean up and change the angles any. So it takes, my eyesight's getting poor enough that I really, to look to slightly bring those over a bit even with the jig. But I've done about 25 pictures now with frames like that. I've probably done at least a dozen jewelry boxes. These are the two glues that I like to use. I've used Old Brown and the Type Bond. You can put them down in hot and warm water like a Kool-Aid pitcher and let them set for 5 minutes, and they get to a very nice consistency, and they start getting tacky when you pour them out pretty quickly. But your open time with those is, I don't know, you might have 8 to 10 minutes. Type Bond Extend I use for veneering. If I was using thin veneers that were a 32nd, a 40th, a 60th that were commercially made, you would have to use a different type of glue because of the bleed through. But I'm basically putting a piece of hardwood that's a 1/16 of an inch thick when it's finished on top of this plywood. So, and I'm choosing what I saw to make it. I buy some little blocks of wood I see that are so tiny, but I'll make little parts out of them, and then I'm buying bigger pieces for other things. But I'm calling all of these things tonight smallish parts. And so those are the two glues I use in my bag. I keep it under vacuum for about an hour, and that's it. And I take it out. I put some tape when I put it in. I roll the glue on. You only glue the substrate. You don't glue your veneer. And it goes on. You flip it over. You always put a backer veneer so that they move the same. So my finishing thoughts are, and I'll be done in just a couple seconds here. Consider less sanding and more card scraping. We did a class on card scraping. Use a block plane when you can. Line your vise jaws with cork, glued to plywood inserts. Finish as many parts as possible for assembly. Rasp is a curved part's best friend, and go shellac, and I will quickly show these. So this is a card scraper. I'm scraping my veneer for the back of a picture that's been veneered onto plywood. Those are the type of curls you need to get if you've got an adequate hook. I own a few different planes. These are the only two I really use much, and that is a low angle jack and a low angle block plane. And the block plane I use the most. You can see the plywood on the jaws. I've pulled them out. What that does is give me cushion, and if I put something in on the edge that isn't, you know, some kind of square piece to those jaws, I can hold stuff. It doesn't tend to mar stuff up. That's basically spray glued to plywood made for my two jaws that I have on my Schoberg bench and cut to fit around the clamping part. This is a rasp. I use a rasp to clean up after it comes off the machining at the router table for those lifts. I use it for the feet. There's many different grits of rasp, from really super coarse to do very rough wood to very fine. This is a number 13 on a scale of up to 15 being the finest. If I was going to own one rasp, I would get that. It's got a round over on one side and a flat on the other. I've had that for probably 15 years. The coarsest I own is about a 6. And Jeff Miller at Superstar will probably talk about using these tools and spoke shaves, because this is the type of tooling you need for curves. You can also wrap sandpaper around dowels for your finishing, different size of dowels for like these hollows. I mentioned shellac, and I did a talk on that a couple of years ago. Somebody called me, was it you, Dan, about flakes? Somebody here called me the other day and said, tell me about, no, I know who it was Leo, about, and he's not here tonight, it was about where do I buy flakes. I've used shellac a lot. I don't buy flakes. I buy the Zinsser, and I think flakes are cool, and I'm not saying don't do it, but it's already pre-made. This is 2-pound cut, and that's 3 pounds. So the standard amber and their standard non-seal coat on the can is 3 pounds. This is 2-pound cut, and what that means is it's more solid in the 3 than the 2 to the solvent, which is denatured alcohol, which was out of my brain a minute ago. So I take this 2-pound cut and I put half and half denatured alcohol to make it a 1-pound cut. And I stick it in some yogurt containers, and the denatured alcohol won't dissolve plastic, and I put a big Dannon yogurt lid on it, and I label it, and it'll stay in there for a couple of months. And I use it, and you just mix it up a little bit. That stuff smells great. If you use it inside your basement, house, whatever, it's not going to stink up your house. It doesn't have all those VOCs that you get with some of the oil and varnish type finishes. So it smells great. It dries super quick. I mean, I can put a coat on and go through several pieces, and by the time I'm done, I'm going back, and it's not been 10 minutes. I would say within 5 minutes, you can touch it. There is a big learning curve to keep it from being too tacky and from getting globby, and it's all in the speed. I tend to brush mine on. I've tried French polish. That brush I've had for probably 10 years. That's a Golden Teclon brush from Hobby Lobby, an inch wide. The other cool thing is, even if you try to clean them out and the shellac still dries in that brush, I stick it in denatured alcohol and leave it in there for a couple minutes. It becomes like new. The ferrule on that brush is getting kind of a little wobbly, so I'm probably going to have to replace it soon. So I keep a couple rinses, and there's my de-waxed 1-pound cut, and that was my mixing cup. And how long did I talk? I swore I was going to be quicker, but I'm sorry. Didn't you say 30 minutes? I was rolling, sorry. So I know this sounds, and I'm kind of an OCD person, obviously. There's several of us in here, Dan, me, I can name more. So, you don't at any point have to do woodworking to this degree. I don't know why this just captured my imagination years ago, and my grandpa was a carpenter. I used to watch him use hand tools when I was a kid, and my dad was a do-it-yourselfer, even though he never built any furniture, and he was kind of sloppy with stuff. But this is things that you could think about and apply them to other projects, bits and pieces of this, and if not, this gives you some understanding of the torture I put myself through. So, any questions? Sorry.
Very good talk. Thank you. Could you mention or talk a few words about your resaw blade?
Yeah. So I have a 14-inch bandsaw, and they're sized by the total distance around. And Highland makes a good resaw blade. And if you're going to resaw non-exotic wood, which isn't as janka hard, and you're not going to do it a lot, that's a great blade to resaw. Mine is the biggest I can fit on my tire is 3/4 inch. The one out the shop is 1 inch, right, Dave? And so after going through 3 Highlander blades, and a little bit of it may have been my setup slightly wasn't as good as it is now, but I said, I'm going to go pay, because those Highlander blades are $50 a piece. I'm going to get a carbide tip blade, which I thought Quinn could sharpen. I thought they'd said that, but they don't, because I called them. And those are about $140 to $150. The one Dave's buying for our big 18-inch bandsaw is $170. I'm not kidding. I have a whole shelving system full of veneer that I've cut, and I used that for a year and a half, and it was going well. And then I tried to get lazy and not switch to a smaller blade and cut a curve. And I created so much heat in the blade that you can't imagine what happened. I didn't see the blade getting red. I didn't know it was getting hot. And I've usually got muffs and face mask on. I start seeing my urethane tire on my upper wheel liquefied running down my bandsaw blade. And so I had to learn how to change the tire for the first time. So if anybody does that, I've gone through that as well. But I really like, if you're going to do a lot, I love those carbide blades. You got to keep your blocks up tight. You don't want them just jammed up against them. And you got to keep the tension, and there's tools you can buy to gauge tension. I kind of push on it and kind of go by feel. And you have to try to get your alignment, although with the big blades, it's got to be on the upper and lower tire. So does that answer your question? Sure. Yeah, back, somebody?
Yeah, on the shellac, I think the reason a lot of people go to flakes is because you can get a wide variety of colors from garnet to, you know, crystal clear, and it'll keep in the flake indefinitely.
Yeah.
And you mix it like the night before. I went to a workshop with Bob Flexner one time. We did French polishing on Saturday, but we mixed it on Friday night.
Yeah.
So it was really good and dissolved. And the stuff you're using out of the can, it will go bad in the can. I mean, not like in a week.
Yeah.
But and I always date mine when I get it.
Yeah.
And if you're sealing the bottom of from like a countertop or something, you can put it on there. It doesn't matter. But that's when it starts getting lumpy.
Yeah.
And I did the same thing for those just utility sealing jobs. I would use those throwaway chip brushes and either throw them away or set them aside, and next time, like you said, just start soaking them ahead of time. And you lose a few, brush. The hair starts coming out of it after a while, but you can shellac that's the good thing about it. You don't have to spend a lot of money on solvent for cleaning. Anyway,
Thank you.
That's my thoughts on the shellac.
Yeah, they put a date on, Zinsser puts a date. It's cryptic, and you have to look online and do like a encryption codey thing with your mind to get it to figure out. I've kept them for a couple of years, but the other thing, you can dye. Trans-tint dye works great in water or shellac. So that's another way you can color. But I think to your point, yeah, if you're doing stuff that you want to get exact or reproducing period furniture that has a certain look.
I also, when used to do cabinets, and you get somebody that's got a beautiful kitchen, but they want one more cabinet colored the same. I never guarantee. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a shot. I'm just going to tell you, here's what we can do. Try to get the base color of the tint that's like in oak in the deep grain. If you can get that matched, the upper you can do in the finish. But I would seal it with shellac instead of sand sealer. Sand sealer is pretty much clear.
Yeah.
Shellac, I'd thin it way down to like a 1 pound cut. And then I'd put one coat on and look at it. Okay. 2 coats. You just layer until you get enough color in there, and then you put your finish coat on, and that's a good way when you got something antique or older finish to match it on that day. Now it may go the other way later too, but that's a tool to get it. And there again, I told him, I said, I'm not guaranteeing long-term stuff on the finish, but by that most people get used to the idea. They know it's there anyway. If you can make it look good on day one, that's
true. Any top, like a tabletop where you might have alcohol setting on it, you don't want to use shellac. So if it gets lots of abuse, but anyhow, I think it's a great product. Any other questions? No. Thank you. Sorry I was so much of a